Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is March 17th, 2020, and I'm very honored and humbled and eager to share with you today's Mormon Stories podcast episode. This is sort of a special emergency episode. For those of you who are listening later in the history books, the entire globe, meaning Earth, is currently being sort of quarantined and swamped with a pandemic, which is known as COVID-19 or the coronavirus. Businesses have shut down. The NBA and major sports organizations have all shut down. People are staying in their homes. Governments are requesting that its citizens all across the world no longer meet in groups of 10 or larger, and thousands of people have died, and there is an inadequate supply of COVID-19 or coronavirus testing kits in the United States and elsewhere. And so governments are currently underreporting the outbreak. And it's particularly tricky because while younger populations are less vulnerable, and the elderly and people with physical health conditions are more vulnerable, younger people can still be carriers, even if they're not at high risk for illness. And a lot of times, or many times, you can be a carrier of the virus without really any overt symptoms. So for all those reasons, we're at kind of a very serious time globally. Because we cover the Mormon Church and we wish the best for the Mormon Church and the Mormon people, we've been tracking the Mormon Church's response. Miraculously, the Mormon Church canceled sacrament meetings for the foreseeable future, which is really good. And we've seen some responses from the church to the coronavirus or COVID-19, which is appropriate and valuable. There have been a few instances where the Mormon Church, as of March 15th, 16th, and 17th, have been sort of very tone deaf in terms of how they are responding. So today's episode is carrying on after several days of posting things on social media. It's a public call for the Mormon Church to please quarantine their missionaries globally, patriarchs, temple workers, all from the COVID-19 or coronavirus. And the basic situation is as follows. I'm being flooded by parents and family members of Mormon missionaries, of elderly senior missionaries, of Mormon patriarchs, of Mormon temple workers, all about the church's inadequate response to the COVID-19 or coronavirus outbreak. It appears as though many church leaders, mission presidents, and missionaries are seeing the coronavirus pandemic as an opportunity to corner people in their homes with the hopes of spreading the gospel. A noble intent from the standpoint of their values. It's also come to my attention that the Mormon Church still is having elderly people come to their temples to do temple work for the living. My understanding is the church has ceased for the time being temple work for the dead, but they're still doing temple work for the living. And all of these elderly temple workers who are in high-risk categories are still congregating at Mormon temples. And then, again, patriarchs, most stake patriarchs are in the high-risk category. And my understanding is that patriarchs are still traveling from home to home to give patriarchal blessings. This is a little bit complicated, especially as the missionaries go, because there are missions that have responded by quarantining their missionaries. My understanding is the MTC, the Improvo, is no longer accepting new missionaries. but for the past several days, the church, the Mormon church, and several mission presidents have put out notices either to parents or to missionaries, basically saying, hey, we've given our missionaries food and supplies. Our missionaries are young and they're healthy and they're not really at risk. So business as usual when it comes to proselyting. And because some mission presidents apparently are responding by quarantining their missionaries, it's super confusing, because I have reports from all over the world where there are mission presidents who are not responding appropriately, and they're basically saying, yes, missionaries, wash your hands, and try not to shake hands, but business as usual, go tracting. I've even had people send me videos of Mormon missionaries coming to their door and knocking on their doors during the coronavirus pandemic. So I am going to read now to you comments sent to me from concerned listeners and family members all over the world. And I just want to, just do whatever I can to continue after several days pressuring the Mormon Church to quarantine all missionaries, to cease temple operations, to stop stake patriarchs from traveling home to home, et cetera, et cetera. So here we go. Quote, saw a note from a missionary in Slovenia next to Italy. Italy has had one of the worst outbreaks in the world. They have higher cases per capita than Italy and huge doubling rate, but still knocking on doors. And people are yelling at them for knocking doors, but God has asked them to. So that's in Slovenia, next to Italy. In Washington, probably the highest outbreak per capita of anywhere in the United States. This is Washington. Yep, I live in Washington, and they showed up at our house last night and said they're actually having great success knocking on doors because people are home, close quote. From Hungary, I've just heard from my nephew in Hungary. The infection rate there is low, meaning the government may not be testing, and so reports of infection rates might be low. I continue. The infection rate there is low, but they are still doing the same things day to day. Sunday, they went to 4 small gatherings of members to hold a mini sacrament meeting. That doesn't seem safe. The thing that really gets me is that my sister and brother-in-law had to send extra money so they could stock up on a few weeks of groceries just in case. I can't believe the church is not recommending and funding that. Next quote. Again from Washington State. It's true. My friend in Washington State had missionaries knock on her door yesterday. She was horrified, as am I, close quote. From Denver, Colorado. Yes, it's true. We had a pair of male missionaries knocking on doors in our neighborhood yesterday. We are near Denver, Colorado, close quote. In Brazil, my son in Brazil was told to buy 2 weeks of food, but still proselyting. His mission president annoys me to death because he never provides any information to parents, close quote. Another quote, they were recorded knocking on my sister's door last night. This is in Salt Lake City, Utah. Another, Montana, my nephew in the Montana mission is still allowed to go door to door. Again, from Colorado, yep, got a niece in Colorado, still out there going door to door. In Spanish Fork, saw them today in Spanish Fork twice. In Wisconsin, my sister in Wisconsin just had the missionaries over for dinner. So much for social distancing, close quote. In Sandy, Utah, saw them today in Sandy, out, close quote. Another one in Seattle, we saw them in our neighborhood yesterday in Seattle, one of the most contagious cities in the United States. In Mesa, Arizona, my friend in Mesa, Arizona said they stopped by today, close quote. And here's the one about temple workers. Hey, John, it's not just the missionaries they have out there. The church is still putting the highest risk category, the elderly, at additional risk. My parents are temple workers. Their schedule hasn't changed at all since all this started. In fact, they were commenting that they're even more busy. The temples, at least theirs, has limited things to living ordinances and weddings, but most temple workers, or all, are the age group that is at highest risk, not to mention all the touching that goes on in a temple and getting close and personal through the veil, which you can't get through without personal contact and handshakes. It's just maddening. My dad is completely unworried since he's in the temple and thinks he'll be protected. Close quote. Up from the family member of a patriarch. Hi, John. Thought you might find this interesting. My father, over 60, is a patriarch. The church is still having him give blessings on a regular basis. The kids and their parents are coming into my parents' house for the blessing. My mom's response, quote, the kids still need the blessings before their missions. Hooray for social distancing. Concerned parents in Brazil, who has a son who's a missionary in Brazil. Hi, John. My son is in Brazil. I wrote to the mission president and asked how they plan to ensure the safety of my son regarding food, water, heat of apartment, etc. if quarantined. I am more concerned about civil unrest and lack of necessities after seeing our country wiped out of the basics the past few weeks. It is so hot there and people have quit answering doors or being in the streets due to COVID-19 fears, and yet my son has been told to continue proselyting as usual. Following as of yesterday, and perhaps because of my letter, they have been asked to have food on hand if they quarantine. I feel so helpless after the Italy fiasco, where they moved everyone but left the boys behind. Are they not bringing our missionaries home so they can leave a foot in the door for future missions to stay open? Beyond concerned. Wish I could start the hashtag Bring Our Missionaries Home. Finally, in terms of comments from listeners, hey, just saw your recent post. My son is in Medford, Oregon, been out about 6 months. He has a compromised immune system. We've been so concerned. We received an email this morning from the mission president saying they're not supposed to shake hands or hug, but to otherwise continue business as usual. They had sacrament meeting with their zone yesterday. Most zones are over 10 people, and went to a member's house with 18 other people to spend some Sabbath time. We're so uncomfortable with business as usual. Talk to our son today. He is concerned also. So all of these things are deeply disturbing. And then we have the responses from the church. So, for example, someone sent me a letter from the mission president of the Mexico City Northwest Mission. It mentions nothing about missionaries being carriers. All it talks about are the safety of the missionaries. And again, one of the problems with COVID-19 or the coronavirus is that young people can be carriers, not show symptoms, but can then carry the disease to elderly and vulnerable people. So this letter from the mission president of the Mexico City Northwest Mission says, hey, dear parents of the Mexico City Northwest Mission, we wanted to touch base with all of you and let you know that all the missionaries in the Mexico City Northwest Mission are doing wonderfully well. Spirits are high, and according to the Mexico Area Presidency and Mission Department, we are business as usual unless we hear otherwise. This is just 1 or 2 days ago, and it's March 17th. The rest of the civilized world is in lockdown. Missionaries are business as usual all across the globe. It goes on to talk about the coronavirus, how young people are not at risk, how they're being, they're getting a 1 week supply of food and water, basic medications, no church meetings being held. They're monitoring the situation. However, it mentions nothing about the missionaries becoming carriers to elderly and vulnerable populations. This is particularly distressing from a Mormon perspective because we expect our leaders to be prophets, seers, and revelators. Mormons are conditioned to believe that the prophets won't lead us astray, that the prophets have a direct line of communication to the divine, that the priesthood will keep them safe, and that they don't need to worry like the rest of the world. Unfortunately, instead of being ahead of the curve of Mormon prophets, Mormon leadership, prophets, seers, revelators, mission presidents, etc., it appears that on March 17th, 2020, and for the past several days and weeks, Mormon church leadership has been behind the rest of the world, the medical profession, the scientific community, most developing and developed countries in having their missionaries and temple workers and patriarchs, etc., all act as though, in too many instances, business as usual. Again, this is not to deny the fact that the church has canceled sacrament meetings and has canceled new admissions to the MTC, and that some missions are quarantining. But the problem is it's not consistent, it's not global, and it looks like the norm, including the church's own press release, which was released yesterday, as I understand it, mentions nothing about quarantining missionaries, mentions nothing about bringing the missionaries home, and mentions nothing about missionaries being carriers. Instead, it just talks about a few safety precautions and then missionaries continuing their door-to-door proselyting efforts. So after multiple days of posting this on Facebook, I and we are amplifying our call to the Mormon Church to please quarantine your missionaries, bring them home, stop door-to-door proselyting globally, stop elderly temple workers and vulnerable from going to temples, stop patriarchs from going home to home. They're vulnerable, at least for the next month or two. Thank you. Please spread the word. Please share this video. Please share the corresponding Mormon Stories podcast post with anyone you can. We need to fix this problem urgently. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be covering both the coronavirus, COVID-19, and over the next few weeks, we will be having many Mormon Stories podcast episodes on this topic and other very interesting topics to provide you with entertainment wherever you are. We have lots of comments coming in from listeners. Amy says at least they shut church down and temples for the most part. A little too late, but they did. That's a good point, Amy. Let's have them go all the way, because way too many missions are still open. Way too many patriarchs and temple workers and missionaries are still going door to door. And even if they're not in danger, they can still be carriers. Linda says it's infuriating. Yes. Neil writes, a 22-year-old man with leukemia just died of COVID-19. Those with chronic conditions and comorbidities are also at tremendous risk. Missionaries going door to door, touching doorknobs and porch rails potentially makes them vectors of the diseases, as the COVID virus lives for days on hard surfaces. Thank you, Neil, for sharing that information. Yes, it's also important to give the Mormon Church credit for canceling the face-to-face meetings of General Conference in April, and they actually did that a little bit earlier, so that's amazing. A skeptical mind would think they did that to save or protect the health of the First Presidency, the Quorum of the 12 themselves, and the general authorities, because that happened really early. But if you're going to cancel General Conference early, why not also protect senior missionaries and temple workers and missionaries, but most importantly, all the people that will be exposed to those missionaries and patriarchs and temple workers as they travel from home to home, meet in large groups, and become carriers to vulnerable people. We need everyone to be taken care of. Melanie writes, many of us already have it and we didn't know. Liposomal C was recovering people in China. Seniors need to be taking that and melatonin. If you aren't aware, China and Italy recently had 5G installed. 5G disrupts melatonin and lowers the immune system, making it harder to fight viruses. I'm not sure of the scientific validity of that statement. Go to the CDC in the United States for best practices to maintain health. Amy writes, I say let's start the hashtag bring the missionaries home. Great idea, Amy. Clark writes, if my kid was out on a mission, I would tell them to ignore their mission president and hunker down indoors. Agreed, Clark. Sally writes, is there no place for personal responsibility? Why is the church alone responsible? Each individual who continues to participate in each of these activities is responsible for their part of it. I'm not trying to be contrary, just trying to understand. Yes, Sally, individual responsibility is also super important, so let's not forget that. However, in the Mormon Church, we have a obedience sort of priesthood leadership, divinely inspired mentality where missionaries are indoctrinated, and temple workers and patriarchs are indoctrinated to obey their church leaders. And so we don't have a culture of following your own mandates if it ever runs in conflict with church leadership. So in the Mormon culture, Mormons look to church leaders for inspiration and guidance and direction. And so individual consciences are weakened. That would be my response, Sally. But yes, every individual should be responsible. Clark says missionaries are potential carriers. It's insane. That's right, Clark. Rita says our missionaries said we are sitting ducks, quote unquote. Mari says absolutely. I'd go pick up mine if she had a missionary. Luis asks an important question: do the young missionaries even feel like they have a choice? Clark writes, I would send my missionary a plane ticket and an Uber today. Amy writes, I think parents should have a choice of bringing their missionaries home. Kat writes, ever since I've listened to Maddy and Camille's podcast, I've thought more and more about missionary safety. And as I read my sweet friends' missionaries' emails about continuing to do stuff, I'm so sad that even a portion better mission safety of what Maddy and Camille are fighting for still feels like isn't being thought about. Yes, if you want an amazing Mormon Stories episode to listen to during this pandemic, the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, Google the Mormon Stories Maddy and Camille episode that shows about how the Mormon Church has a long way to go to keep their missionaries safe and healthy. Martine echoes what I just shared. Martine writes, hey, Martine, Sally Forth, the indoctrination is to obey, and it is so strong. Even senior missionaries waited until the church told them to return home. It's unbelievable. Logan writes, speaking from when I was a missionary, it wouldn't have felt like a choice. If God commanded it, I wouldn't have done it, so I wouldn't have had to make a choice to go home. Sean writes, tell your missionaries to not be such a strict rule follower. Strict rule following was a deterrent to my mental health on a mission. Give them guidelines from CDC, NIH, and WHO. God has revealed through science, and it's time for us all to listen. Again, go to the CDC website, the NIH website, and the WHO website for scientific suggestions on what to do. Thank you, Sean. Kara writes, I wonder if they're doing it because they think it's a good opportunity to talk to people while they're trapped at home. So sad. Yes, Kara, I've already read quotes from missionaries who said that they were excited to proselyte during the coronavirus and during the COVID-19 pandemic because they're finding people at home, which gives them more opportunity to proselyte. Unfortunately, these missionaries can be carriers of the virus and can spread the illness even if they don't develop their own symptoms. Jin writes, mass evacuations happening out of the Philippines at the moment, so last minute. They should have moved them weeks ago. Now I'm worried my missionary won't get a flight out. So yes, again, this is where prophets, seers, and revelators are handy. If they truly speak to God, if they truly get revelation ahead of time, missionaries should have been evacuated weeks or months ago, not after the rest of the civilized and even developing worlds have already started quarantines and evacuations. Now, today, or this week, after we've been giving this so much exposure, the Mormon Church may respond, hopefully, but even then it's going to be too little too late. So please, Mormon Church, please do the right thing today. Please don't wait any longer. But I'm happy to hear the Philippines is evacuating people. Let's see. Shelley writes, missionaries probably not even getting information from news other than the church. Yes, Mormon missionaries are discouraged from reading the newspapers, watching TV, anything that would even tell them. I know that when I was a Mormon missionary, the Berlin Wall came down and the Tiananmen Square happened, and I didn't even know about it till I got home. So major global events can happen, and missionaries who are in pueblos or small towns, highly removed, cannot even hear about this until it's way too late. And so, this is a problem on so many levels. Tracy writes, as I struggle to understand the LDS culture, it is so easy to see the sheep mentality. The missionaries are young adults that apparently don't feel capable of making their own decisions. Why don't they think they can make their own choices? Because they are deathly afraid of long-term ramifications from not fully serving their missions. The fear culture fails in community. Parents are not raising their children to value, balance their own thoughts against LDS culture. All right. Rick speculates, I wonder if the church leaders are worried about young elders with time on their hands getting up to no good, locked up in their apartments. Yes, that's a reasonable concern. As they say, idleness is the devil's workshop. When the cat's away, the mice will play. I am sure Mormon church leaders are worried that if missionaries aren't kept busy, they'll get on the internet, they'll find podcasts, they'll find CES letter, they'll look at porn, they will get into mischief. And I can see that as reasonable, but that's no reason to put, number one, the missionaries' health and lives at stake, but more importantly, to send the missionaries out to be carriers to the elderly and the vulnerable, against the advice of the civilized world and even the developing world. John writes, so glad modern technology allows us to watchdog irresponsible practices like these. We've seen so much positive change implemented as a result. Every organization benefits greatly by having a watchdog group, keeping it honest and safe. Well done, John. Thank you, John. I would rather not be covering these sorts of topics. I've promised my wife and brother and so many others to stop being a watchdog for the church. I don't like it. I want to focus on healing and growth and community for progressive and post-Mormons. And it was literally just myself as a returned missionary, as someone who cares about Mormon missionaries, cares about the Mormon people, cares about citizens of the world, just being so disturbed that on March 15th, March 16th, March 17th, Mormon missionaries are still being told to proselyte worldwide. I was just so flabbergasted by this. And again, patriarchs are going door to door as vulnerable populations, giving patriarchal blessings, and temple workers, elderly people are still going to Mormon temples and congregating in groups. It's unconscionable, and this should have been stopped weeks or months ago. Let's see. Logan writes, I've seen people claim that Russell M. Nelson knew about this because he told us to take our vitamins and that this conference could be different than any other. I'm saddened that people are using this disaster to promote their religion. Yes, I've seen many people in progressive and post-Mormon communities frustrated that many Orthodox Mormons are using this COVID outbreak and the coronavirus pandemic to laud the church, saying that the church is visionary, that God put a medical doctor as the prophet, that various things that the prophets have done and said, or church leaders have done and said, are witnesses that the church leaders are inspired by God. If the Mormon church leaders were inspired by God, it would seem as though they would have pulled missionaries away from proselyting, pulled elderly away from going door to door as patriarchs, and pulled elderly out of temples long ago, instead of just protecting the First Presidency of the Quorum of the 15 from the spread at General Conference. Again, it's March 17th. We've been publicizing this for days. It's already too little too late, but it's not too late. Mormon Church, please do the right thing. Please stop having missionaries worldwide proselyte. Roger Hendricks is trying to promote his wonderful product, green tea, and because I love you, Roger Hendricks Jr., and your dad, Roger Hendricks Sr., I'll allow it just this once. Roger Hendricks Jr. writes, say your prayers and continue to follow the one and only true prophet, John DeLynn. No, Roger Hendricks Jr., I am not a prophet. I am a flawed human individual who is clueless on so many levels and makes a million mistakes. But I think this one's pretty clear. So let's please spread the word. What I'm going to ask everyone to do right now is please share this video. Please forward it all over Facebook. Please spread the word. And if we get the news out immediately, I think we can get the Mormon Church to change in a matter of days, if not hours, if not minutes. If you go to the MormonStories.org website, you can find a video that I posted of Mormon missionaries just yesterday or the day before knocking on people's doors. And you can have a big list of all the quotes that I've already read, just so that you have them in your back pocket. But please share this episode on your social media. And if 1,000 people share this episode, or even 100 people, it can go viral. And then at that point, if it goes viral, then the news media can pick this up, and then we can get the church to stop, because we know that the church pays attention to media and press releases and things like that. Another anonymous post from my dear friend, whose name will be withheld. My nephew and his fiance just decided to move up their wedding 3 months to this weekend to get into the temple before it closes. And they're still having a reception. Why are they doing such a drastic thing? Because they want to have, sex, of course, and don't want to wait. So they're literally risking people's lives so they can have sex. Thank you, anonymous listener, for sharing that disturbing story. That does not make sense. Please don't have temple weddings and receptions just for those sorts of reasons. Please postpone them. Please call them off, or please just have them yourself. Go get married at a civil wedding at a town hall, and then have the reception and temple wedding later when things subside. We need to flatten the curve. Another person just wrote in, Brendan, my sister-in-law works for the church at Beehive Clothing, where they make garments. People are in very close proximity, working in teams of 5 or more in a big factory, but they're still being asked to come to work as usual. So it looks like the Mormon church is still having its workers manufacture temple clothing while there's a pandemic. So another disturbing account that I will add to the list. This really needs to end. If anyone should be protecting its people, its workers, it would seem the Mormon church should be. I think Mormons can do without temple garments, at least for a few weeks or a month or two, until things subside. So please, that's disturbing. Thank you for sending me these accounts. Curtis writes, I had a mission companion who wanted to go home. The church would not buy his ticket to go home, and his father, who was a stake president at the time, also refused to buy him a ticket home. He even thought of trying to barter for a ride on a boat in exchange for working on the boat. Yes, they have a choice to leave, but in some cases it means they have to go against their religion and family to do it. Carla gives me great correction. I welcome this feedback. Carla writes, John, every time you say the civilized world and even the developing world is literally, quote, unquote, is literally saying that developing nations are not civilized. Choose your words better, John. Carla, I stand corrected. I have been to the developing world. Amazing humans there. I did not mean to disrespect anyone. So I do think it's okay to say the developed world and the developing world, or at least last time I checked. But you're right. There's no need to insinuate that the developing world is not civilized. Thank you for the feedback. We love feedback. I apologize for misspeaking, and I love it when people correct me and give me that type of constructive feedback. So thank you so much, listeners. And please keep that type of feedback coming. I will continue to make a mountain of mistakes, but I love the feedback. All right. So yes, Carissa writes, also Deseret Industries is still open, still accepting donations, still training workers. Close DI, don't accept donations. So again, looks like Deseret Industries is still open. Another example of the church either putting workers or missionaries or mission, other people at risk, or spreading it to other places. Kimberly Anderson writes, this is the healing and growth. If we're all sick, we can't heal and grow. This is an important point to step back into vocal activism and hold the church accountable. Bravo and thank you. Kimberly Anderson, we love you. Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. And we will continue on Mormon Stories podcast to do activism as we see the need. Please all do your part right now. Please share this video worldwide. If 100 of you share it, it will go viral, and then news media will pick it up, and then hopefully the Mormon Church will quarantine its missionaries, quarantine its senior missionaries, quarantine its patriarchs, quarantine its Deseret Industry workers, quarantine its who else? Quarantine its temple workers, quarantine its garment manufacturers, quarantine all the people that need to be quarantined at least for another month or two until things quarantine its young, eager Mormon couples that want to get married in the temple and have receptions. Quarantine everyone, please. Jen writes, I told my missionary 3 weeks ago I wanted her home and going to buy her flights home. But she said she wouldn't get on the flight and the virus doesn't like hot environments and that she's safe in the Philippines. So Jen is telling us of an exact example where Mormon missionaries feel safe. They feel like they can avoid the coronavirus with faith, and they're getting bad information, such as in a warmer climate, the coronavirus is going to die. That is bad information. Please, let's keep our missionaries safe. Carla writes, once again, the church is showing us who they really are. We need to believe them. And I want to hope and believe the Mormon Church cares about its missionaries, cares about its employees, cares about its volunteers. So let's just all do our part as activists to spread this video and the Mormon Stories post and anything we can to just get the word out. All right, I think I've made my point. I really appreciate everyone who has tuned in today. And just so you know, we will be super active on Mormon Stories podcast over the coming weeks. I have several really cool interviews planned. We will also be covering the coronavirus and COVID-19, and we hope that within the next few minutes or hours or days, the Mormon Church decides to recall its missionaries, recall its senior missionaries, recall its patriarchs, recall its temple workers, quarantine them all, stop temple sealings, stop wedding receptions, stop Deseret Industries, stop accepting donations, stop making DI people work, stop having people work in manufacturing plants on temple garments. All those things can wait for a month or two. Please spread the word. Thank you for supporting Mormon Stories podcast. And please stay tuned in the hours, minutes, weeks, days, months ahead for important coverage of this and other important topics. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Enjoy your time at home. Stay safe. Avoid crowds. Use hand sanitizer. Go to the doctor. Get tested. Don't spread this. Don't be a carrier. And just chill out for another month or two until things die down and you're safe. Sure appreciate the support. Love you guys, and we'll see you again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories podcast. In fact, just in a few minutes, we're going to come back with an epic Mormon story that we think you're all going to really care about an insider's view of the administration at BYU Idaho. So take care. Talk to you soon, and we'll see you soon again on Mormon Stories podcast. Stay safe, missionaries, senior missionaries, patriarchs, etc.